The rise of the Kingdom of Nubia. Throughout the scorching heart of the African desert, where the Nile River cuts a winding jewel through the sands, a forgotten kingdom once rose in splendor and power. Long before the pharaohs of Egypt reached the height of their glory, an ancient civilization was already shaping the course of history farther south, Nubia, the land of gold. This is the beginning of a story often overshadowed by its northern neighbor, yet it holds astonishing greatness and mystery. For millennia, the Nubians lived in harmony with the river that gave them life. The Nile was their source of water, transportation, spirituality, and identity. Along its banks, communities thrived, building the foundations of a culture destined to challenge empires. Early Nubia was not a land of primitive tribes, as many once assumed. It was home to skilled farmers, talented craftsmen, and formidable warriors. The first great urban center of this civilization was Kerma, founded more than 5,000 years ago. Here, people erected monumental structures of mud brick, unlike anything found elsewhere in Africa at the time. Towering temples, known as defufas, dominated the city's skyline. These temples were the heart of religion and royal authority, where the living and the spirits of the ancestors met in rituals steeped in mystery. Kerma's wealth came from the trade routes that crossed its territory. Nubian caravans dominated the paths connecting Central Africa to the Mediterranean world. Gold, ivory, ebony, exotic animal skins, and precious gemstones flowed through the kingdom, granting immense prosperity. Even the mighty Egyptians recognized Nubia as the legendary Taseti, the land of the bow, a name that revealed both Nubia's military prowess and its unmatched archers. But as Nubia grew in strength, it also drew the watchful eyes of Egypt. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom dreamed of expanding southward, coveting Nubia's resources. Over time, conflicts erupted. Fortresses rose along the border. Armies clashed in the heat of the desert. And eventually, the balance of power shifted. Egypt invaded and occupied much of northern Nubia, attempting to dominate its people and control its riches. Yet the Nubians refused to vanish. Their culture endured and waited. Generations passed under foreign rule. Egyptian gods mixed with local beliefs. Hieroglyphs appeared on Nubian monuments. The cultures blended, but deep in the hearts of the Nubian people, the flame of independence never died. And eventually, the moment of rebirth arrived. From the sacred city of Napata, beneath the shadow of the holy mountain Jebel Barkal, new Nubian leaders emerged. They would not only restore the greatness of their homeland, they would march north and conquer the land that once tried to subdue them. A rising star was about to change the ancient world. His name was Piye. The Black Pharaohs. Piye was not like the rulers who came before him. He saw himself chosen by the gods to restore order to the world. Unlike Egypt's declining leadership, Piye was guided by strict values, strength, justice, and devotion. He believed the gods favored the pure of heart, and he held deep faith in Amun, the supreme deity adored in both Nubia and Egypt. From Napata, he watched the political chaos in Egypt with sharp eyes. Egypt at that time was a fractured land. Local warlords and rival dynasties fought for control, weakening what was once the most powerful kingdom on earth. Each year, their armies grew smaller, their temples poorer, and their unity more fragile. To Piye, this chaos was more than an opportunity. It was a divine calling. With his loyal commanders by his side, Piye marched northward along the Nile. His army was not the ragtag force the Egyptians believed it to be. Nubian soldiers were trained from childhood to master the bow, earning their reputation as the most precise and deadly archers of the ancient world. They carried shields of leather and spears tipped with bronze, moving in disciplined formations. As city after city fell to his advance, Piye sent a clear message. Those who surrendered would be treated with honor. Those who resisted would face ruthless consequences. His strategy was as brilliant as it was merciful. He wanted loyalty, not ashes. When Piye arrived at Memphis, the great capital of Egypt, he encountered fierce resistance. The defenders believed the city walls were impenetrable. But the Nubians had different plans. Rather than waste time with a long siege, Piye launched a swift assault, breaching the defenses before the Egyptians could react. The city fell, and with it, the illusion of Egyptian superiority. Inside the palace, the defeated rulers bowed before Piye, presenting their crowns in submission. They begged for mercy, and they received it. Piye did not slaughter his enemies. Instead, he demanded something far more important: allegiance. They swore loyalty to him and acknowledged him as the rightful ruler of both Nubia and Egypt. Thus, Piye became the first pharaoh of Egypt's 25th dynasty, the dynasty of the Black Pharaohs. From the temples of Thebes to the deserts of Nubia, a united kingdom began to flourish. Art, architecture, and culture entered a new golden age. The Nubian pharaohs rebuilt monuments neglected by their predecessors and revived ancient customs long forgotten. Egypt, under Nubian leadership, returned to its former greatness. But history is never a straight line. Even as Piye restored stability, powerful threats stirred beyond the Nile. In the east, the Assyrian Empire was rising like a storm. Ambitious, violent, and hungry for conquest. Their armies were feared across the Middle East. They saw Egypt's resurgence under Nubian rule as a challenge to their dominance. It would not be long before swords clashed again, but Piye would not live to see that storm. After securing unity and stability across the land, he returned to Nubia, satisfied that his mission was complete. He spent his final days in Napata, honored by his people and remembered as a hero blessed by the gods. When Piye died, his burial reflected a return to tradition. Although he had ruled Egypt, he chose to be buried in Nubia, beneath the desert sky, in a pyramid smaller but spiritually richer than those of the ancient pharaohs. His tomb marked not only his legacy, but also the dawn of a new era, for Piye's descendants were destined to rise even higher. Among them, one name would shine brighter than the rest: a warrior king, a builder of monuments, a ruler whose courage would be tested by the greatest empire of his time. His name was Taharqa. The legacy of a forgotten empire. Today, as the sun rises over the deserts of Sudan, the golden sands quietly guard the monumental story of an empire long overshadowed by its northern neighbor. Broken statues, weathered pyramids, and buried temples whisper a reminder. Nubia once shaped the destiny of the ancient world, but for centuries the world forgot. Historians focused almost entirely on Egypt. Museums showcased pharaohs, mummies, and pyramids from the north, while the achievements of Nubia remained hidden beneath layers of time and misconception. Some even claimed that Nubia was merely a lesser reflection of Egyptian greatness, never acknowledging that it was Nubia that once conquered Egypt, ruled Egypt, and revived Egypt. Only in recent decades have archaeologists begun to uncover the truth. Excavations at Kerma, Napata, and Meroë reveal a civilization with its own brilliance, a culture of powerful queens, master craftsmen, fearless warriors, and deeply spiritual leaders. A society that blended the desert's harshness with the river's generosity, turning challenges into triumphs. The story of Nubia is also a story of endurance. It is about a people who faced the most powerful empires of their time, Egypt, Assyria, and Rome, and refused to be erased. They adapted, they rebuilt, they transformed, and even when they eventually faded from the stage of world politics, they left behind a legacy carved in stone. Look at the pyramids of Meroë. Though smaller and more numerous than those of Giza, they carry a unique elegance, steep sides reaching sharply toward the sky, as if determined to pierce the heavens. They stand as monuments to kings and queens whose names once commanded armies and shaped history. Look at the statues of Taharqa, carved with proud features and wearing the royal regalia of a pharaoh. His image was meant to be eternal, and in a way it is. His story continues to inspire, representing a time when the South became the center of power and culture along the Nile. Look at artifacts made by Nubian hands, iron tools, pottery painted with symbols of the sun and river, jewelry forged from gold that once gleamed under the desert sun. Each piece reminds us that innovation and artistry flowed freely through the Kingdom of Kush. And look at the memory of Queen Amanirenas, the warrior who stood toe-to-toe with Rome. She fought not for expansion but for freedom, and in doing so, preserved her people's sovereignty. Her defiance echoes through time as proof that courage can change the course of history. Nubia's story challenges the world to rethink the past. It calls us to widen our vision, to recognize that civilization does not belong to one people, one land, or one empire. The roots of humanity stretch across continents, and in those roots, Nubia holds one of the strongest branches. Though its monuments may not reach the same fame as Egypt's, their significance is no less profound. The sands of Sudan cover a royal lineage that once shaped empires. Beneath the dust lies a chapter of history filled with triumph and tragedy, brilliance and hardship, an empire that refused to be forgotten. Now, the world is finally listening again. Archaeologists continue to uncover tombs, inscriptions and ruins that shed new light on this extraordinary civilization. Museums expand their exhibits, honoring the kings and queens who once ruled the Nile. Scholars rewrite the ancient story, placing Nubia back where it belongs, at the forefront of Africa's legacy. And every time a traveler stands before the pyramids of Meroë, feeling the desert wind and staring into the past, Nubia rises once more. Because history is not only written in books, it is carved in the earth, and the Kingdom of Nubia carved its story deep into the sands of time, their power, their pride, their resilience, a reminder that forgotten does not mean lost. Meroë, the forge of a new empire. When the Nubian pharaohs withdrew from Egypt, the world believed their glory had ended. But they were mistaken. From the ashes of lost territory, a new civilization emerged, stronger, more resilient, and unmistakably Nubian. The beating heart of this reborn kingdom was the remarkable city of Meroë. Situated between fertile savannas and the deep currents of the Nile, Meroë became a hub of innovation, trade, and cultural pride. Unlike Egypt's sandstone temples and grand pyramids, the architecture of Meroë reflected a fresh identity. Dozens of steep, narrow pyramids dotted the desert horizon, smaller but more numerous than those of Giza, each a monument to royalty and ancestral honor. Below the pyramids, life thrived. The streets of Meroë were filled with merchants, artisans, scholars, and travelers from distant lands. Caravans arrived laden with goods from Central Africa, iron, livestock, ivory, incense, and exotic plants. Ports along the Nile bustled with ships carrying fabrics, ceramics, and treasures to the Mediterranean world. But among all these riches, one resource powered Meroë's rise above the rest: iron. The kingdom mastered ironworking on a scale unseen across Africa. The glow of furnaces lit up the night skies as blacksmiths hammered red-hot metal into tools, weapons, and agricultural instruments. The clang of hammers became the music of progress. With iron, the Nubians cultivated lands more efficiently, expanded their military power, and dominated trade routes others could only dream of controlling. Meroë was also a place of remarkable culture and artistic expression. The Nubians developed their own written language, a script different from Egyptian hieroglyphs, signaling a bold step toward independence of identity. Their pottery carried vibrant designs. Their jewelry shone with intricate patterns and precious stones. Their statues embodied fierce pride and divine connection. Women in the Kingdom of Kush held extraordinary power. They served as queens, priestesses, and political leaders. Among them, one name would rise to legendary status, a queen who would challenge an empire that once conquered most of the known world: Rome. After the fall of Egypt to Roman rule, the empire extended its iron grip toward Nubia. They expected submission. They expected fear. But what they found was a kingdom ready to fight for its sovereignty. In the 1st century BCE, Queen Amanirenas took the throne, a warrior queen, fierce in battle and wise in strategy. With a regal presence and a commanding voice, she united her armies to confront Rome's expansion. When Roman officials demanded tribute, she refused. When Rome marched south, she marched north. Her warriors struck swiftly, targeting Roman strongholds along the Nile. In a bold move, they destroyed statues and symbols of Roman power, sending a message impossible to ignore. Nubia bows to no empire. The Roman response was brutal. Their legions, armed with heavy armor and advanced siege tactics, pushed into Nubian territory. Battles raged across the deserts, dust clouds rising like storms as iron clashed and arrows darkened the sky. During these conflicts, Queen Amanirenas lost her eye in battle, but even wounded, she returned to the front lines. Her determination became a symbol of Nubian resilience. She was not fighting for conquest. She was fighting for the soul of her people. Eventually, neither side gained decisive dominance. Rome realized that subduing Kush would require a cost far greater than the land was worth. In a rare moment of compromise, a peace treaty was signed, one of the very few in which Rome treated another African nation as an equal. Kush would remain independent, its borders respected. This victory was more than political. It was cultural. It reinforced the identity of Nubia as a sovereign power, unconquered, unbroken. But as centuries passed, trade routes shifted. The once thriving economy of Meroë weakened. The desert sands crept closer. Resources dwindled, the world changed, and the Kingdom of Kush slowly faded from the forefront of history. Yet like the pyramids that guard their kings and queens, the legacy of Meroë endures, waiting to be rediscovered. Taharqa rose to power in a world on the brink of chaos. His predecessor, Piye, had united the lands of Egypt and Nubia, but now a new terror loomed on the horizon. The Assyrian Empire, the most brutal military machine of its time, was hungry for conquest. Their armies were a storm of iron and fire, equipped with war chariots and unstoppable siege engines. They demanded that Egypt bow before them, but Taharqa was not a king who knew fear. Crowned as a young man, he was filled with a fierce Nubian pride and an unyielding will to protect his people. In the grand halls of Thebes, he made a solemn vow. He would defend the legacy Piye had forged, no matter the sacrifice. Taharqa was not just a warrior, he was a visionary. He poured his energy into honoring the gods, commissioning magnificent temples, statues, and sacred monuments dedicated to the great god Amun. He expanded the legendary temple of Karnak and erected towering obelisks that pierced the sky, showing the world that Nubia wasn't just a shadow of Egypt, it was the very heart of its revival. But while Taharqa built for eternity, the drums of war beat ever closer. The Assyrians, relentless in their ambition, launched invasion after invasion. They came as a tidal wave, razing cities and scattering armies. Yet, Taharqa stood firm. In the scorching Sinai desert, the two empires clashed in savage battles. Nubian archers filled the air with deadly volleys, while their infantry locked shields, forming an unbreakable wall of bronze and courage. The Assyrians attacked with terrifying force, but they could not shatter the resolve of the Nubian pharaoh. At times the struggle seemed hopeless, but Taharqa drew strength from a powerful source, his faith. He believed he was Amun's chosen protector of both Egypt and Nubia. In his darkest hours, when the roar of battle threatened to extinguish all hope, he looked to the heavens and found the will to fight on. He wasn't alone. He forged alliances with other kingdoms in the Levant, like Judah, who also feared Assyria's insatiable hunger for power. For a brief moment, It seemed this coalition could hold back the tide and change the course of history. But Assyria's might was relentless. Under the command of the ruthless conqueror Esarhaddon, their armies stormed the great city of Memphis. Taharqa was forced to retreat south, but he refused to surrender. Even in retreat, his spirit was unbreakable. He launched daring counterattacks, striking the Assyrians when they were most vulnerable. History remembers Taharqa not for the cities he lost, but for the empire he dared to defy. Few challenged Assyria. Even fewer survived to tell the tale. Taharqa did both. However, the cost of endless war was staggering. The conflict bled his kingdom dry, weakening it over years of fighting. Eventually, the Assyrians pushed forward, forcing Taharqa's successors to withdraw completely from Egypt. The glorious era of the Nubian pharaohs on the Egyptian throne had come to an end, but their story was far from over. The Nubians returned to their ancestral homeland, first to Napata, and then to a city that would become a beacon of their resilience and ingenuity, Meroë. There, amidst the golden sands and blazing forges, a new chapter began. This new era wouldn't be defined by Egypt, but by the unique spirit and creativity of the Nubian people themselves. In Meroë, iron would become the kingdom's lifeblood, trade routes would flourish, and a distinct and powerful culture would rise from the ashes of war, a culture the world would one day rediscover with wonder. The Kingdom of Kush was not merely surviving, it was transforming. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. See you next time.